Listen up. This is not just another narrative. This is a confirmation. You have felt it, right? That pull, that unstoppable force, the realization that you were never meant to fit into their mold because you were designed to break it. They don't talk about people like you. Not openly. They do not teach this degree of strength. Because if you knew and really understood, everything would change. You were not meant to blend in. You were never meant to be ignored. They tried to bury you, rewrite you, and take away the weight of your presence from their carefully crafted narrative. But this is the truth. The truth refuses to be buried. Your influence is not simply remembered. It is perceived. It lingers in rooms long after you depart, resonates in the minds of people who had before doubted, and now they're learning the hard way. This is a reminder. You are not ordinary. You are irreplaceable. You are not someone people will forget. Keep going. Keep rising. Because every attempt to remove you just reinforces your identity. They believed that they had totally erased any traces of you, buried behind layers of time and lost in the silence of forgotten pages. However, absence does not imply disappearance, and shadows cannot engulf those who will never disappear. When your presence returned, the illusion of their control crumbled. Their attempts to eliminate you were undermined by their own lies. What they thought was a closed chapter was really an unfinished sentence. You were not a fleeting thought. You were the echo that never ceased. The presence that defies incarceration, the inexorable return of what cannot be undone. Their confidence dwindles under the weight of reality. Their perspective is no longer one of sanctuary, but of self-imposed incarceration. Reality bends to forces beyond their grasp, and you are among the unshakable, undeniable. They refuse to acknowledge their past. Submission, whispering louder. With each breath, their efforts to hide it become the very ties that connect them to their memories. They can't look away since it won't change what's left. What they previously overlooked has now become the compass that directs their every thought. You are no longer bound by memories. You are a presence inscribed on the fabric of time. Erasure-proof. I'm not worried about doubt. Their illusion of stability dissolves in the face of apparent strength. The truth is that wishful thinking cannot alter reality. Their arrogance in moving on without dealing with the past proves to be their downfall. They built barriers to avoid the inevitable, but walls crumble under the weight of what refuses to be ignored. Time itself does not provide an escape. This is a testimony that will not be forgotten. An unrelenting tide keeps them from floating away. They have no power over the story because they never shaped it. Leave a mark. If you are not just a memory, but a force that redefines existence, your presence will endure. It condenses and sharpens, emphasizing each trace. Every enduring impression is not a relic, but rather a pulse, a distinct rhythm woven into the fabric of perception. When they realized it was not nostalgia, but an immovable certainty, a presence too enormous to be reduced to recollection, a reminder that the past is not lost. It transforms. The effect extends beyond the physical, manifesting in the invisible currents that flow throughout their life. An invisible force seizes control of their senses, changing their reality. This is not a comeback. This is a revelation. What they ignored has taken form. What they're underestimating, it has claimed space. The door they shut was never closed, and the barrier they crossed was only an illusion. Now they're on the other side of their own denial, faced with what was never meant to be forgotten. The past does not seek permission to return. It does not sit well on the edge of memory, waiting to be discovered. It assaults without warning, infiltrating the regions they said were secure. Their bodies deteriorate before their minds can catch up. The sudden constriction of their chest, the weight pressing against their ribs, and the peculiar alteration in the air. This is not nostalgia. This is a reckoning. The body contains truths. The mind refuses to process. What do they reveal? Silence could not. They believed that absence signified erasure. However, energy is not lost. It compacts. It strengthens. It resurfaces. The equilibrium is never unstable. It corrects itself perfectly. Your presence was formerly seen as a gift, an offering meant to uplift. But it went a waste. The scales have tilted, and the repercussions are too severe to ignore. The persistent fatigue, the tension pushing hard behind their eyes, and the lingering sense of dread. It is not chance. It's a consequence. It is the unseen force of justice that restores what has been distorted. Denial neither alters reality nor protects individuals from the unavoidable consequences. They do not feel the same weight you do. Their actions need resolution. What they formerly dismissed as insignificant now deserves their whole attention. Dear brothers and sisters, may God's peace be with you today. I am here to remind you of a basic reality. Our existence is rooted in God's divine purpose, unfazed by the world's ephemeral concerns. According to the Bible, whatever done with faith will be repaid to God with tremendous blessings. Luke 638. Like a big oak tree, our roots are deeply anchored in God's universal truth. His might protects every step and posture we take. You now have the opportunity to be a part of that gift. There is no safety in ignorance. There is no immunity by pretense. They clung to false security, taking shelter in illusions that can no longer be maintained. The unraveling happens gradually, methodically, and purposefully. Their basis crumbles not from outside pressures, but from inside. The distinction between what individuals choose to believe and what is really true. Their choices were never without repercussions. The results just took their time to come. The body does not lie. They ignore the signs, while the remainder never lose the weight, which just becomes heavier. It is the unspoken reaction to an unavoidable reality. Leave your mark if you are more than simply a memory. If your existence bends reality itself, your presence will endure. It sharpens and intensifies. Reclaim space in ways they can't grasp. Every detail, every whispered phrase, is a pulse that continues to beat throughout time. When they experienced your presence, they felt it not as a distant remembrance, but as an undeniable force pressing against their own life. There is no undoing what is woven into the fabric of existence beyond the visible world, beyond their knowledge. The unseen moves with purpose. Their breath catches. Their feet falter. Their mind searches for a rational explanation when none exists. This is not a coincidence. This is the weight of what they once had, but they failed to see that the door they thought they closed was never closed, and they are now on the point of their own doom. Recognition dawns, nor gentle, nor forgiving, but absolute, since nothing is concealed and cannot be exposed or disguised. This will not be known or shared. Luke 817. They imagined they had closed the door behind them. They assumed their choices, betrayals, and denials had been hidden away, never to be spoken again. But the past does not sit still, and the truth does not stay hidden. What they tried to silence is now shouting louder than before. They are on the point of facing what they pledged never to face. No amount of dodging, rewriting, or escaping will change what has already been set in motion. You see, destiny does not ask for permission. Purpose does not need confirmation. And those who have been selected, those who have been put apart from the beginning of time, are not bound by the constraints of those who have undressed, and they are alive. You are never an afterthought in their story. You were the hurricane that reshaped the landscape. You were the shift. They never prepared for it. They thought they could cut you out of the picture, but the canvas was made for you. They felt they could go on without repercussions. But time bends to those who have divine favor. The weight of their own choices is pressing in. Their palms quiver when they hear your name. It's in the way their breath catches when they recollect how they ignored you. Their own lives have become a mirror, and no matter how hard they try, they are unable to escape what they have already seen. They never had control. They never had the power they thought they had. They were just standing in the middle of something beyond their understanding. Because you were not forgotten. You were not dismissed. You weren't just another name forgotten over time. No, you are woven into the foundation of something greater than they could have imagined. You are not just a person. You are a declaration. You are a living illustration of what happens when divine favor crosses with human limits. You show that when God sets anything in motion, no force on earth can stop it. They are now watching. They are helpless and realizing that the climb they promised would never happen. They miscalculated, assuming you were just another chapter in their book. But you were never a sentence in their story. You were the force that rewrote the whole thing. So, stand tall. Move on. Because what was designed to harm and shatter you has really made you stronger. What they intended to remove has now become the one thing they cannot escape. No weapon created against you will succeed. You will condemn every voice that speaks out against you in judgment. Isaiah 5417. This is when they realize you weren't the one who needed them. They needed you. And now, it is too late to turn back. Power served as their foundation, anchor, and source of confidence. But every success you make shatters the illusion they built their lives on. Previously, they believed they had influence over the outcome, set the terms, controlled the path of destiny itself. However, your very existence disrupts the fabric of their constructed reality. They watch in awe as you conquer obstacles that should have been obstructions. Rebels come victorious from apparently insurmountable challenges. They search for explanations, striving to explain what logic cannot understand. However, they are unable to get any answers. It wasn't only your strength that concerned them. That was what your strength meant. Because if you can disrupt their neatly constructed universe, it was never complete. If you can disprove the structure they believed was impenetrable, then none of their assumptions are correct. Knowledge gnaws at them, breaking down their confidence piece by piece. You do not operate within the limitations that they recognize. You are not constrained by the limits that they established. You exist beyond their rules. They are unable to anticipate this unusual event, a force that cannot be quantified. That is why they will never comprehend the pattern of your accomplishments, because they've spent their whole lives believing in a system that never had the power to define you. Leave a comment. I'm the anomaly in the equation. If their calculations could never anticipate your ascent, if their calculated forecasts unravel the moment you walk in, and if every concept they believe crumbles in the face of what they refuse to accept, their clandestine attempts to destroy you fail before they ever begin. Every covert action, every subtle strike fades before it reaches its intended victim. They've frequently seen their own weapons recoil, traps break, and conspiracies unravel in front of their eyes, as if reality itself bends to your advantage. What was designed to weaken you comes back to haunt you twice as much. They can't explain the presence that protects you, but they can feel it. A power that turns every act of resistance into their own destruction. Some call it chance, but others who have seen it firsthand know better. The underlying unease in their gaze indicates what they are afraid to say out loud. They've seen what happens to those who stand in your way, those that plot against you only to become victims of their own actions. This is neither fortune, nor is it just great planning. Something in the basic fabric of reality bends before destruction strikes you. Every attempt to divert your course weakens their own foundation. Instead, they attempt to destroy you just to watch themselves vanish. Even the fearless. Tread carefully now, calling your name with prudence, knowing that the tough and untouchable have consequences. There is no equation that explains why barriers crumble before your eyes, but science does explain why the storms they cause never land where they should. They employ logic to comprehend the pattern, but they do not grasp it. Their name is nonsense. Their words falter in the face of something that refuses to be contained. However, you have never needed their understanding. You were not meant to be understood. You were created to survive. They have reduced you to an anomaly. Every step was examined as if it were an enigma that could not be answered. They maintain records. Track your progress. I'm certain that a solution exists somewhere inside the layers of observation. They categorize others by reducing them to probabilities and predictions. However, you do not comply. They felt they could chart your course. However, the path you choose is purposefully arbitrary. Every paradigm and theory they create collapses under the weight of your refuse. What should have been predicted is beyond their comprehension. Their numbers fail them. Their rationale unravels. Their plans cannot accommodate what refuses to be confined. They aren't losing track of you. You just exist outside of the system they established. The more they want control, the more unstable their own reality becomes. They rely on certainty, believing that knowledge is the ultimate source of power. However, understanding you has made them impotent. When their well-planned strategies are put into action, they fall apart. Their attempts at correctness bring them closer to chaos. They felt you could be evaluated using their measures and monitored by their systems. But you don't follow their rules. Their displeasure extends beyond the fact that you continue to rise. It is that their desire to comprehend you has become their downfall. The stone that the builders rejected is now the cornerstone. Psalm 118:22. There's something about being overlooked, underestimated, and counted out. They thought they could create without you. They felt they could write the story while keeping your name off the page. But they don't comprehend that when God divides something, or anoints a route, no gate, lock, or hand can stop what has already been written in heaven. You were never intended to fit into their tiny blueprint. You were never intended to move in the way they planned. They built their gates, procedures, and rules, certain that they could contain something they had no control over. They misinterpreted hurdles for ownership. They believed that if they controlled access, they could also control destiny. However, destiny does not react to them. The objective does not need clearance. So, every time they push, you go higher. When they close one door, another swings open. Not because you forced your way in, but because you were always expected to be there. You don't need to fight for a seat at their table since your name has already been etched in places they never imagined going. They don't understand how you continue to go forward, how the journey that should have ended in a dead end continues to unfold under your feet. This is due to their worldly vision. However, what is guiding you is not of this world. They cannot see your next move because you are in harmony, not according to the system. However, divine strategy mandates that your name be removed from the records. However, the image you leave behind is irreversible. They try to disable your links, but Farv keeps drawing people to you. They strive to minimize your influence, but it just expands. Those who recognize God's impact on you will mention your name. If God is on our side, who could be against us? Romans 8:31. They've spent so much time trying to limit you, only to find themselves restricted. They assumed they had control over the outcome, but every calculation they ran failed to account for what they couldn't see. The unknown force that turns events in your favor. You were never theirs to remove. They expected you to shrink and evaporate as they turned their backs. But you did the opposite. You multiplied. You bloomed. You moved in ways they didn't anticipate. They passed through portals they had no idea existed. They imagined they could design your downfall. But each attempt has just reinforced your position since you were never performing at their level. You don't reply to them. You do not need their permission. And you surely do not need their approval. So let them watch. Allow them to wonder. Allow them to exhaust themselves attempting to discover what was never within their control. They tried to keep you out, but all they did was show that they lack the authority to do so. Nobody can shut what he's opened. Nobody can open anything he shuts. Revelation 3 verse 7. They thought they had the last word, but the guy with the keys had already written your name on the door. They watched with growing worry as new partnerships developed beyond their control and opportunities arose, where they said none existed. Every barrier they erect just broadens your influence. Every restraint just heightens your presence. Their world is based on exposure and actual influence. However, you thrive beyond their gaze. They want to forecast your moves, but by the time they turn to pursue you, you've already gone out of their sight. They operate inside the boundaries of established locations. Assume you must use the same logic, but are in a different dimension, maneuvering via unknown channels and constructing pathways that they did not recognize until it was too late. Their confusion stems from an inability to understand your momentum. That's because you're not going through their turf. You're modifying it. They evaluate your actions, looking for weak points. attempting to determine the source of your resistance. However, each effort to disparage you only reinforces your position. They saw your ability to overcome obstacles. Disruptions that should worry you seem to work in your advantage. They mutter about chance. Their thoughts are straining to justify what does not fit into their beliefs. However, this is not a random event. This is alignment. An unknown pulse is hammering under the surface, recalibrating the battlefield to ensure your victory. They're reluctant now. Doubt has crept into their once reliable techniques. They have been on the point of your demise. Too many times, you've waited for the moment you're going to fail only to find that it never arrives. Again and again, they feel obliged to see you succeed, as if failure is not an option. They can't comprehend how you transcend beyond their calculations and the constraints of their reasoning. Every problem, impediment, an unseen hand acting against you just strengthens your position. What was never meant to contain you will never hold you back. They scheme, certain that accuracy would destroy the fundamental foundation of their beliefs, shattering under their own weight. Every snare they construct collapses before it reaches its victim. Pressure does not diminish you. It crystallizes your strength. They press on, believing that endurance has limits. However, each attempt just increases your resistance. Their weapons fail not because to a lack of strength, but because they were never designed to conquer what is unique. The opposition makes the error of assuming that only resistance can change destiny. But desperation does not dictate outcomes, and you were never in their hands to begin with. The quiet they perceive for surrender is really the purposeful stillness that occurs before a tidal shift. They mistake your patience for skepticism, blind to the truth that unseen forces have already shifted the playing field in your favor. Their downfall does not need your aid. It is sustained by the weight of their own choices. The currents they believed were fixed moved against them, repelling any attempts to stop you. They expected you to struggle. Instead, they find themselves undermined and dismantled by the same forces they formerly controlled. They are left to see what they promised would never happen. Witnessing victories, they sought to avoid what they mistook for power from being a fleeting illusion that vanished in the face of something immovable. They were never the architects of your fate, merely observers as it unfolded. As they grasp the truth, a thick coating of regret settles in. Every assault was unsuccessful. Every betrayal, an empty gesture. Every move they made only expedited their own downfall. Those who tried to belittle you have just withdrawn themselves from the tale. The last word was never theirs to utter. It never was. They looked into the past, seeking to connect you to old legends. But you've risen beyond their level, untouched by their prejudices and unshakable by their accusations. What formerly impeded you now collapses on impact, vulnerable to the power of your momentum. They whisper your name in lonely corners, believing that their words would shatter your foundation. However, your presence is no longer inside their area. It reverberates far beyond their understanding. They are tied with something unbreakable, and they are terrified of what they cannot control. They can now only observe. Their greatest error was assuming you would meet their expectations. They get smaller as you climb. Every effort to marginalize you just increases your position. Their animosity grows with each triumph they promised you would never claim. However, their constraints never determined your destiny. Your trek was never meant to be understood by those who weren't destined to follow. They failed to comprehend the dynamics at play. You are no longer constrained by the same weight that holds them in place. You operate in accordance with something beyond their understanding or comprehension. They sought your silence, erasure, and subjection. But each attempt to thwart you just increased your determination. Their resistance became fire, their anger, a lesson you were never meant to just endure. Endurance is for those who hang on to what they have left. But you evolve. Every adversity cleansed you, and every betrayal strengthened your resolve. They watched from a distance, unable to intervene as you ascended beyond their reach. Unshaken, untouchable, undeniable. Their denial doesn't alter your reality. Their distrust does not alter your direction. You move perfectly as guided by forces. They are unable to manipulate. They believe that time was on their side. It's time to devise a strategy to change your course. However, time does not bend to their will. It works to your favor, realigning events that may have killed you. They're no longer active players. Silent and restless, they cling to beliefs that no longer serve them. They compare themselves to what they failed to suppress. It stays in the back of their minds. Unshakable. Hold your ground. Protect your vision. Let those who question fade into insignificance. When the moment comes, speak not for them, but for those who need it. For individuals still being shaped by fire who have yet to discover their own purpose. Share your journey. Let the world see what occurs when people who are set apart refuse to break. Let your presence serve as proof that what is divinely protected cannot be undone.